name is Addi.
And my name is Hannah, and we're the host of the podcast His Will, Your Life.
Our podcast aims to share a Christian perspective on issues facing our world today.
Today's episode will cover abuse. First thing we're going to be discussing is the types of abuse. So, first one that most people think of when they hear the word abuse is physical abuse. This includes any type of physical harm to another person or anything to make someone feel physically unsafe. So some of the first things people think about are kicking, slapping, punching, spitting. But there's other things too, such as driving recklessly, doing anything to make the person feel like at any point they will be physically injured. The next type, a biblical example of physical abuse, is when the Babylonians killed Zedekiah's sons in front of him, then removed his eyes. This story is in 2 Kings 25, verse 7. The next type of abuse is emotional or mental abuse. This is defined by BetterHelp.com as when a partner uses mind games to control their loved one. Some signs of emotional or mental abuse are degrading someone, stalking, isolating someone, humiliating, intimidating, or insulting. A biblical example of emotional abuse, in 1 Samuel 25, Abigail was married to Nabal, who was emotionally abusive. Next type of abuse is verbal abuse. This is basically breaking one down with words. This includes humiliation, yelling or arguing frequently, being blamed for arguments, guilt tripping, or just being condescending towards someone else. Biblical example of this type of abuse is King Saul verbally abused and mistreated his son Jonathan in 1 Samuel 20, verse 30. Last type of abuse that I'm going to define for you is sexual abuse, which is defined by Healthline as when a person forces their partner to perform any kind of sexual acts or sexual behavior without their consent. The obvious one is rape or forcing someone to have sex with someone else, but it also can be forcing someone to have sex without birth control or physically harming someone during sexual acts. So one thing that I want to say right off the bat is if you or someone you know is being abused, the domestic violence support, this amazing support group, has a website, thehotline.org, where you can chat live, or you can call 1-800-799-7233 to get help. They now have a texting option as well. You can text START to 88788. It's completely free and it's confidential. So if you or someone you know is in a situation and you need help, don't wait to call or text this hotline. Get the help while you can.
Yeah, those are, if you take classes at Liberty University Online Academy, specifically girls' health, you will learn also about the types of abuse, and it'll be a more in-depth information packet, I would say, about that. Definitely, if you go to Liberty, take a girls' health class. One of the best classes you can take there. But another example of emotional abuse I would like to point out, and physical abuse, it's a mix of both, is not from the Bible, but is from ancient times, and that was King Croesus and his son. His son was deaf, actually, and he would constantly bully and berate his son, which is also emotional abuse. And then one day, after trying to make him king for a while, he decided to just give up, and he kicked his son out of the kingdom and said that he could never come back. So he banished his son from his own kingdom, which he should have gotten rightfully since he was the eldest. And even though that's an extreme version of what's happening, it is something that can happen in today's terms of being physically abandoned by your parents or something. If you know a child, or if you are a child watching this video, which hopefully you're not, but if you are, tell a trusted adult or a guardian or somebody about what's happening to you. They will always be there to listen and help with whatever you need with that.
Absolutely. Basically, like you said, don't wait to get help, especially if you're in a situation where you still can. It's hard to talk about, but sometimes you get past that point and you can't get help again. So just take that initiative and get it at the beginning if at all possible.
Yeah, and a lot of people, especially if you're being abused, I want you to hear this loud and clear. It won't get better. It'll only get worse. So if you think, well, it's bad, but it's not that bad. He's only slapping me, he's not punching me or anything like that. Well, the next time he gets mad, maybe he'll punch you, and it'll be too late at that point. You're going to have to figure out some lie, because with abuse comes lies. You have to cover up a way to say that it's not happening to you, even though it is. And that should be a telltale sign of abuse to somebody. If you think somebody's story sounds off, pull them aside, ask them what's happening. They might not appreciate it right away. They might try to be defensive, but just knowing that somebody's there will probably make a lot of a difference to them.
It definitely will. One thing that I've heard that's a great way to put it is tolerating it is accepting it. And when you tolerate it, they're going to keep doing it. So stop it as soon as you realize what's going on.
Yeah, and tolerating can be either just accepting that it's happening to you, or if you know about somebody that's being abused and you just don't want to say anything because you don't want to get in trouble, at that point it doesn't matter. Somebody's life in some way is in danger, even if it's their emotional health or their mental health. That is still a life in some way. So tell somebody if you're being abused. If you know somebody that's being abused, tell somebody that they're being abused. Like Hannah said, there's a great domestic violence hotline. If you look up, there's a suicide helpline as well. There are plenty of hotlines and helplines. Reach out to one of them if you don't have a trusted adult or guardian or helper to do that for you.
Absolutely.
So I have a few statistics that I'd like to share with you. I kind of had them broken up by the type of abuse. So the first thing I would like people to know is every 9 seconds, a person is abused in the United States. And 1 in 4 women have experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner. In 8 out of 10 rape cases, the victim knows the attacker. Only 28% of sexual assault victims report their sexual assault case to the police. And now we're going to get to children, which is the heartbreaking ones, to be honest. More than 4 children die each day because of child abuse, and approximately 70% of those children that die from abuse are under the age of 4. And with psychological and emotional abuse, 80% of people, the whole population of the United States, have experienced emotional or psychological abuse. Whether they realize it, whether they don't, they've experienced it.
Yeah, those are heartbreaking statistics. And exactly like you said, even with any type of abuse, a lot of people are being abused and don't realize it, which is one reason that it's a hard topic to talk about, but it needs to be talked about so that people know the signs and can realize when they're being abused and when they need help.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important thing to recognize abuse, because when you do, you can start processing it and you can start working through it, maybe by yourself, maybe with a therapist, maybe with a counselor. But working through that will be such a breakthrough for a person that was abused. And I hope that somebody watches this video and realizes maybe they're in an abusive situation, maybe they're in a bullying situation. They're very similar things. But I hope that if you're watching this video and you are being abused or you are being bullied, that you do learn something from this, whether it's the statistics about abuse, whether it's the whole recognizing I'm being abused, I need to get help. No matter what it is, I hope you're able to get help. And I know I'm praying for you. I know Hannah's praying for you. You're in our thoughts. You're in our minds, and God's got you carved on the palm of his hand. That's what I say.
Definitely. There's ways out, and unfortunately there are people who don't make it out, like even the children that you're talking about, with the amount of them that die each day. It's awful. So doing research and things like that, I know we're not going super in depth. There are plenty of studies and articles that you can find online with symptoms and signs of any type of abuse. So if you think you or someone close to you are dealing with something, learn to look for it, learn to recognize it so you can help yourself or help others.
Yeah. We got to help each other, because if we don't learn to help each other, the world is going to be a very, very bad place. Now, I believe each of us have verses that we'll be able to share with you. So, Hannah, if you'd like to start with yours, that's cool. If you want me to start with mine, that also works.
I can go ahead and do mine. My first one is 1 Peter 3:7. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And my second one is James 1:19-20. My dear brothers and sisters, take notes of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not reproduce the righteousness that God desires.
Very powerful words. It's definitely good if you're in an abusive situation to hear. So my first verse that I chose was Jeremiah 29:11. Give you a little bit of hope. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And the other verse that I chose was Ephesians 4:29-32, and that reads, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you.
Those are definitely good. I like Jeremiah 29:11 because, like we've both said, it's a hard thing to talk about. It's heartbreaking, but there is hope in any situation like this, but especially in abusive situations, there's definitely hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did want to give just a little bit of advice real quick, if that's all right. So
absolutely.
First, I know I've said this already, but do your research, especially if you think you're being abused and you're not sure, because there are so many people in that situation where they think they could be, but they're not sure, and they don't want to do something or get somebody in trouble if it's not what they think. So learn the signs and don't tolerate it, which we've both said repeatedly. Anybody who you talk to about abuse is going to say it. Don't tolerate it. Get out of that situation if you can, any way you can get out. There are shelters and church groups probably near you, and it's a Google search away to find where the nearest one is. And many of these shelters and churches have groups to move on from it after you're out of the situation. They have support groups. And again, I think Addi talked about this, but you can't change the person. You cannot make an abuser stop abusing. You can, however, get out of that situation and pray for them and let God change their hearts if that's His will. And when you realize that you are being abused or someone you know is, get help. It is totally okay to get help for someone else. And they may get mad at you. But if you help them, it doesn't matter how they feel. You're possibly saving their lives.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll add on to that a little bit. I only have two pieces of advice because, to be honest, I've never been abused. So I can't really say a lot about that. And I don't think Hannah can either, but we can offer advice. We can offer prayer. We can offer thoughts. DMs are open. Comments are open if you ever need to do anything such as that. But my two pieces of advice are, don't rationalize it. If you're being abused, don't say, well, it might be abuse, but I don't know. Rather report it to somebody, and if it's false, that's okay. You know what? At least if you were being abused, you would have gotten help and you would have gotten out on time. So it's better to get help and have it be a false alarm than have it be a startling truth. That's my first bit of advice. And my second bit of advice is rely on the Lord and rely on that plan that He has for you. The best thing that can happen to anybody in an abusive situation is knowing that this is not the end. This is not where you're going to stay your whole life. This isn't what's going to be you. This is not defining you. God is what defines you. God is what's going to help you move on from this. He has a plan for such great things for you and for such a great future for you. So don't let this become what holds you down from all the great things that you can do. Because even if you don't have a high school degree or a bachelor's degree, you can make so much of a difference in this world while we're still here.
Exactly. Those are great pieces of advice. And I like how you said that it's not, your abuse is not what makes you you. That is not what defines you. And I feel like that's part of the reason so many people are scared to get out of that situation. They get used to it and they think it's part of them and it's what makes them them. And it's not. You, like I mentioned to these groups, there's so many ways you mentioned counselors, therapists, you can get through this and get yourself back, because honestly, you lose yourself in the abuse, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you deserve better. You're a human being too. You're not just a doormat. You deserve better. You deserve all the best in life, no matter what you've done.
Thank you very much for joining us today as we discussed abuse.
And keep tuned, because next week we'll be covering teen pregnancy.
We send our thoughts and prayers out to all of you, and remember to press that like and subscribe button.
And we will see you next time on
His Will,
Your Life.